The late afternoon sun dipped low behind the rooftops, painting the quiet street in shades of amber and rose. The world seemed to move slower in this part of town, a place where time felt softer, and the wind carried the faint scent of pine and old wood. Ethan Miller walked home from the grocery store, his usual bag of apples and instant coffee swinging gently at his side. He lived alone in a small rented apartment above a corner bakery that always smelled like cinnamon and warmth. Two things he never quite got used to living without for the last few years. Ethan's life had been quiet. Not unhappy, but quiet in that kind of way that comes after you've lost too much and learned not to expect much more. His job at the local printing shop kept him busy. His coworkers were kind but distant. He went to work, came home, read old books, and sometimes stood by his window, watching the world move on without him. It wasn't loneliness that hurt him most. It was the silence, the kind that sits inside you and waits, whispering memories of laughter you once knew. He had once been engaged. Her name was Lena, a teacher with a laugh that could brighten a room. But life had other plans. A sudden illness took her, and with it, Ethan's sense of home. That was 3 years ago, yet some days it still felt like yesterday, and so, on most days, he carried on doing small, ordinary things that helped him feel human again, like grocery shopping, like feeding the stray cat that always lingered by the steps, like watching sunsets that reminded him there was still beauty, even in endings. That's when he saw her, across the street, near the same grocery store he visited every week. A woman was struggling to lift 2 heavy paper bags from her car. She wasn't young, but not old either, somewhere in her late 30s or early 40s. There was something graceful about the way she moved, though it was clear she was having trouble managing the weight of the bags. And the wind that kept tugging at her hair. Ethan hesitated for only a moment before crossing the street. "Hey, let me help you with those," he said, his voice calm but kind. The woman looked up, startled for a second, then smiled. A small, tired smile that carried warmth. "Oh, thank you. I thought I could manage, but I think I misjudged my strength." Her voice had that soft, lilting tone, the kind people used when they were used to being polite. "Even when they were hurting, I've been there," Ethan said with a gentle grin, taking one of the bags. "Happens to the best of us." She laughed quietly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'm Clara," she said. "Clara Hayes. I live just down the street." "Ethan," he replied. "It's nice to meet you, Clara." As they walked toward her house, the conversation stayed light about the weather, about the bakery nearby, about how the town felt smaller every year. She told him she'd recently moved back after spending years away. He didn't ask why. Something in her voice said she wasn't ready to tell. When they reached her small blue house, Ethan noticed the garden overgrown but beautiful. Wild roses leaned toward the path as if greeting them, their petals faded from the season but still stubbornly holding on. He set the grocery bags down on her porch. "There you go," he said. "Mission accomplished." Clara smiled again, but this time her eyes softened. "Would you like to come in for a moment? Just until the rain passes." Ethan glanced up, and sure enough, dark clouds had gathered overhead. The wind had shifted, carrying the promise of rain. He hesitated, the polite part of him ready to decline. But something in her expression, a mix of gratitude and quiet loneliness, made him pause. "Sure," he said finally, "just for a bit." The house smelled faintly of coffee and something familiar. Maybe vanilla candles or old books. It was the kind of home that looked lived in, but not messy, filled with pieces of a story he didn't yet know. There were photographs on the mantel, a younger Clara standing beside an older man with kind eyes. A wedding photo, maybe? "Your husband?" Ethan asked softly, hoping he wasn't overstepping. Clara nodded, her smile fading just slightly. "He passed away 2 years ago." Ethan froze, unsure what to say. I'm so sorry." "Thank you," she whispered, setting the kettle on the stove. "It still feels strange talking about it." They stood there in a quiet that wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy with understanding. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt something stir in him. Not romantic, not yet, but human. The kind of connection that happens when two people recognize the same emptiness in each other. When the rain began to fall, they sat by the window, sipping tea and watching droplets slide down the glass. Clara spoke first. "You know, I used to love the rain," she said. "My husband and I would sit outside on the porch just listening to it. I stopped doing that after he passed. I guess I didn't want to remember." Ethan looked at her, his voice low. "Maybe remembering isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's how we keep the people we love close." Her eyes glistened, and she nodded. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the world blurred under the steady rhythm of rain, as if giving them a space to breathe. When the clock struck 6, Ethan stood. "I should get going," he said. "Thank you for the tea." Clara walked him to the door. "Thank you for helping," she replied softly. "I don't usually let strangers in, but you didn't feel like one?" Ethan smiled, a little surprised by how deeply her words touched him. "Maybe we're both just tired of being strangers," he said, and as he stepped out into the cool, rain-scented air. Clara watched from the doorway, her heart quietly stirring for the first time in years. Neither of them knew it yet. But that small act of kindness, carrying a few grocery bags on a cloudy afternoon, had already begun to change both of their lives. The next few days came and went quietly. Like pages turning in a book, Ethan didn't realize he was still reading. He hadn't planned to see Clara again. Their brief meeting had felt like a soft chapter that was supposed to end their polite conversation. Shared tea, a glimpse into someone else's sorrow. But life has its own rhythm, and sometimes it brings people back without warning. It was a Saturday morning when Ethan stopped by the local market for fresh bread. The rain had passed, leaving the world bright and washed clean. And there she was again, Clara, standing near the flower stall, carefully choosing a small bouquet of white daisies. "Daisies," Ethan said as he approached, a warm smile touching his lips. "Simple, but they always stand out." Clara looked up, pleasantly surprised. "Ethan," she said, "I didn't expect to see you again." "I live nearby," he said with a shrug. "This market's part of my weekend routine." She laughed softly. "Mine too, apparently." There was a pause, that gentle kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. Then Clara held out the bouquet. "They were his favorite," she said quietly. "I take some to the cemetery every Saturday. It helps me feel like I'm still keeping a promise." Ethan nodded, his eyes softening. "That's beautiful," he said. "You're still showing love in the only way you can." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Around them, life went on. People chatted, children laughed, vendors called out prices. But for Clara and Ethan, time slowed. There was something fragile in that moment, a shared understanding between two people who had both loved and lost, yet somehow still found themselves standing here, breathing the same morning air. When Clara left with her flowers, Ethan found himself walking beside her again, not out of obligation, but because it felt natural, like continuing a sentence that hadn't finished yet. The small cemetery sat on a hill overlooking the town. Clara knelt to place the daisies beside a simple stone. The engraving read, "David Hayes, forever in our hearts." Ethan stood a few steps back, not wanting to intrude. But when Clara turned toward him, her eyes glimmered with something between sadness and peace. "He was my best friend long before he became my husband," she said softly. "We met in college. He used to make me laugh about everything, even the things that weren't funny." Her voice trembled just slightly. "We were married for 12 years. He got sick, and it all happened so fast. I still wake up sometimes expecting to hear his voice." Ethan listened quietly, his hands in his coat pockets. He didn't rush to speak. He just let her words fall into the quiet morning air. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "You must miss him every day." Clara whispered, "But lately, it feels like I'm learning how to miss him and still move forward. That's new for me." They walked down the hill together afterward, the path lined with autumn leaves that crunched beneath their shoes. Ethan shared a bit of his own story. Not everything, but enough. He told her about Lena, about how they used to spend weekends hiking, and how he couldn't bring himself to visit their favorite trail again. Clara listened closely, her expression soft and open. "You still love her," she said. "I do," he admitted. "But love changes. It becomes something quieter, like gratitude that I got to know her at all." She nodded, as if understanding something unspoken. It was the first time either of them had said these things out loud in years, and somehow it didn't feel painful, just honest in the weeks that followed. Ethan and Clara began crossing paths more often, sometimes by coincidence, sometimes by quiet design. A trip to the market, a walk in the park, a wave through the window when he passed by her street. Ethan helped her fix the garden gate one afternoon. Clara brought him coffee as he worked, and they ended up sitting on the porch, talking until the light turned golden. "I used to love this garden," she said, glancing toward the fading roses. "Duh." The air smelled faintly of rain and fallen leaves that evening. Ethan had finished his shift at the printing shop and was walking home slowly, letting the cool wind brush against his cheeks. His mind wandered, as it often did lately, to Clara, her quiet smile. The way her eyes seemed to carry both loss and hope at the same time, it was the kind of evening that made ordinary streets feel cinematic. And as Ethan rounded the corner near her house, he spotted her again, standing at the gate, holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Clara," he called softly. She turned, startled at first, then smiled warmly. "Ethan, I didn't expect to see you out here." "I could say the same about you," he replied, approaching the gate. "What's that you're carrying?" She held it up with a small, playful shrug. "Just some old photographs I found while cleaning the attic. Thought I might finally organize them?" Ethan nodded, intrigued. "Mind if I help?" She hesitated, then gestured toward the porch. "Sure. I think I could use some company." As they stepped inside, the room felt familiar, yet different. The soft glow of a single lamp created pockets of warmth against the fading twilight. Clara set the package down and began carefully opening it. The first photo she pulled out was of her and David, laughing beneath a willow tree in the park. Ethan noticed the light in her eyes soften as she traced her finger over the image. "I remember this day," she said quietly. "He had this ridiculous idea to climb the tree and take a picture from above. I refused, of course, but he did it anyway." Ethan smiled, imagining the moment. "He sounds like someone who lived fully," he said. "He was," Clara whispered. Every day felt bigger with him around. There was a pause, filled only by the soft hum of the heater and the distant sound of children playing in the street. Then Clara pulled out another photo, this one of her younger self, holding a small golden retriever puppy. "I always loved taking care of him," she said. "He was full of energy, and somehow he taught me patience." Ethan chuckled. "Sounds like he left quite an impact on you. You carry pieces of him everywhere, don't you?" Clara looked at him, her gaze lingering. "I suppose I do. And sometimes it's comforting. Other times it's hard." They spend the next hour sifting through photos and old mementos. With every picture, Ethan felt a deeper connection to her, not just to Clara herself, but to the life she had built, the love she had known, and the heartache she had endured. It wasn't a romantic connection yet, not in the traditional sense, but it was real, intense, and raw in its emotional honesty. Two people meeting in the present, yet bound to the echoes of the past. Then, as Clara reached for one last photo tucked at the bottom of the package, something small yet profound happened. The photo slipped from her hands, fluttering to the floor. Ethan bent down instinctively to catch it. It was a picture of a sunset golden light spilling across a lake, with Clara and David sitting side by side on a dock. He noticed the way her hand rested gently on his arm, a gesture of trust and affection frozen in time. Clara's eyes met his. "I didn't expect that to surface tonight," she admitted softly. Ethan handed the photo back, their fingers brushing briefly. Neither pulled away. The touch was fleeting, yet it carried an electric warmth that neither could ignore. They looked at each other for a moment, not speaking, just understanding. Something had shifted, as if the universe had nudged them together with gentle insistence. A small coincidence, a simple slip of a photograph. created a space where unspoken feelings could breathe. Clara shook her head lightly, a shy laugh escaping her lips. It's strange, isn't it? How little things can bring back so many memories, and maybe even stir something new. Ethan nodded. I think that's life sometimes. Moments that seem small, but they remind us that we're alive and that we can still feel deeply. For the first time in weeks, Clara didn't feel the weight of her past pressing on her chest. The grief was still there, yes, but in that moment, it felt lighter, less suffocating, more like a memory she could carry without being crushed by it. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood. Ethan glanced at the window, noticing how the soft light illuminated her face, calm, wistful, and beautiful in its unspoken longing. I'm glad you came over tonight, Clara said finally. I wasn't sure I wanted to revisit all of this, but having you here made it easier. Ethan smiled, a quiet warmth in his voice. I'm glad I came too, and I'll come again if you'll let me. Clara looked down at the photos once more, then back at him. I think I'd like that. And as Ethan stepped out into the crisp night air, he felt a shift in his heart, subtle yet undeniable. The past, with all its weight and memories, had opened a door to the present. And now, walking home beneath the gentle glow of streetlights, he realized that perhaps fate had more plans for them than either had imagined. Sometimes, it only took a single twist of chance, a photograph, a coincidence, a shared moment to bring two lives closer together, to awaken feelings that had been lying dormant, and to hint at a story that was only just beginning, because the heart remembers even when the mind tries to forget. And in that remembrance, it finds room for something new, fragile, beautiful. And entirely the late afternoon sun filtered softly through Clara's living room curtains, casting gentle patterns across the floor. Outside, a faint breeze stirred the branches of the trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and the lingering hint of rain from earlier that day. Inside, the air felt charged with something neither of them had named yet, a tension that was quiet but impossible to ignore. Ethan had stopped by, as he often did lately, to help with small household chores, carrying groceries, repairing a loose shelf, or just keeping Clara company while she worked in the garden. It had become routine in its own gentle way, a rhythm that neither wanted to break. Today, however, was different. Today there was a weight in the silence that hadn't been there before. Clara was sitting on the couch, a worn photograph album on her lap. She hadn't noticed Ethan's presence at first, and when she finally looked up, she hesitated, unsure how to start the conversation that lingered between them like a shadow. I found some more pictures in the attic, she said softly, her voice tentative. Old ones I hadn't seen in years. Ethan moved closer, settling on the arm of the couch beside her. Do you want me to look with you? He asked, trying to keep his tone casual, though his chest tightened in anticipation. Clara nodded. She opened the album slowly, flipping to a page that showed her and David laughing beneath a sunlit tree. Her finger traced his face, and a quiet sigh escaped her lips. I miss this sometimes, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Not just him, but the way life felt back then, carefree, bright, full of possibilities. Ethan nodded, understanding without needing her to explain. I know that feeling, he said. There are moments when the past seems closer than the present. Clara looked at him then, and for a brief moment, the distance between them seemed smaller than it had ever been. Do you ever feel like you're holding back? She asked, her eyes searching his. Ethan's heart skipped. He knew exactly what she meant, the unspoken words that hovered between them, fragile and potent. He had felt it too, the quiet pull that neither dared to name. Sometimes, he admitted, it's easier, safer, to keep things unsaid. And yet, Clara murmured, it doesn't make the longing any less real. They sat in silence for a few minutes. The kind of silence that feels full of memories, full of possibilities, and full of the emotions that linger just beneath the surface. Ethan watched her closely, noticing the way her hands trembled slightly as she held the album. The way her lips pressed together when she tried to suppress a smile or a sigh. I think, Clara continued after a pause, that we're both afraid. Afraid that if we let ourselves feel something new, it might be too much, or too soon, or even wrong. Ethan nodded slowly. I've felt that way, he confessed. I don't want to hurt you, or myself. And yet, I can't deny that being near you feels like hope, like a quiet kind of homecoming. Clara's gaze softened, and she lowered the album. Hope, she repeated, tasting the word. I've almost forgotten how that feels. Ethan's heart ached at her honesty. He wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, to say the words that hovered on the edge of his lips. But he hesitated. Fear and respect held him back, and he didn't want to overstep, even though every fiber of him longed to close the distance between them. For a moment, the room seemed suspended in time. The soft glow of the lamp, the gentle ticking of the clock, the faint rustle of leaves outside, all of it felt like the universe had paused, giving them a chance to exist in this delicate, fragile space. Clara finally broke the silence, her voice trembling slightly. Do you think it's possible to feel something new while still carrying the past with you? Ethan looked at her, meeting her eyes with steady calm. I think it is, he said softly. It doesn't erase what we've lost, but it allows us to move forward slowly, carefully, honestly. Clara exhaled, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Honestly, she whispered, I think that's what scares me the most. Feeling something again? After everything, Ethan reached out instinctively, resting his hand near hers on the couch. He didn't touch her, not yet, just enough to let her know he was there. I feel the same, he admitted, and I promise we'll take it one moment at a time. The tens. The first snow of the season had arrived, coating the streets in a soft white blanket. Clara's garden, which had been fading into autumn hues, now sparkled under the delicate layer of frost. She wrapped herself in a thick scarf and stepped outside to admire the quiet beauty. The world felt peaceful, almost suspended, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to forget the weight of her past. Ethan's footsteps crunched softly on the snow as he approached her gate. Clara looked up, surprised but delighted to see him. You're early, she said with a small laugh. I thought I'd come by before the roads got too icy. Ethan replied, brushing snow from his coat. And I figured someone should enjoy this winter magic together. Clara's smile widened, and she stepped aside to let him in. They walked slowly through the garden, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. It was a simple, ordinary moment, yet the quiet intensity between them made every step feel significant as they reached the small bench beneath the bare branches of an old oak tree. Clara hesitated. She had been holding back for weeks, keeping her emotions carefully contained, fearing that if she allowed herself to feel too much, she might be swept away before she was ready. Ethan noticed the hesitation in her eyes and reached out, gently touching her hand. You don't have to hold it all in, he said softly. I'm here. Clara swallowed, her chest tight with unspoken feelings. I know, she whispered. It's just, sometimes I worry that if I let myself feel, I'll lose control, that the past will come rushing back and I won't be able to move forward. Ethan gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. The past is part of who we are, he said, but it doesn't have to stop us from experiencing something new. From being happy again? Her gaze dropped to their hands, the warmth from his touch seeping through the layers of wool and leather. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The snow, the trees, the quiet street all faded into the background as the present moment took center stage. Then, a small incident broke the fragile silence. A gust of wind swept through the garden, sending a scattering of leaves across the path. Clara laughed, startled as one of the leaves fluttered into Ethan's coat. He chuckled too, bending to pick it up. And in that simple, shared laughter, the tension that had been building between them began to shift. I guess life has a way of reminding us not to take things too seriously, Ethan said, holding the leaf between his fingers. Clara smiled, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the late afternoon sun. Maybe it's also reminding us that we can't always control what we feel. Ethan looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time in a long while. He saw the mixture of vulnerability and courage in her expression, and his heart responded with a tenderness he could no longer ignore. "You're right," he admitted, "and I don't want to hold back anymore either." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She had been waiting for a sign, a hint, that it was safe to open her heart again. And now, standing beneath the frost-kissed branches, she felt a gentle nudge, a promise that perhaps this moment could be the turning point she had been longing for. For the next hour, they walked through the snow-covered streets talking about everything and nothing. They shared memories from their past, hopes for the future, and little confessions that had remained buried in quiet hearts. Each word, each glance, each laugh drew them closer, and the unspoken feelings that had been simmering beneath the surface began to rise. Finally acknowledged without fear or judgment, by the time they returned to Clara's doorstep, the sky had turned a dusky pink and the first stars were beginning to twinkle above. Neither of them spoke immediately, reluctant to break the spell that had formed between them. Finally, Clara turned to Ethan, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you," she said, "for being here, for understanding, for letting me feel again without rushing me." Ethan smiled, a warmth in his eyes that mirrored her own. "I should be thanking you," he replied, "for letting me in, for reminding me that it's never too late to care, to hope, to feel." There was a pause, a quiet understanding that this evening marked a shift, not the end of their journey, at the beginning of something new. Something fragile, delicate, and beautiful. A turning point that promised growth, healing, and the slow, steady building of trust and affection as Ethan walked home beneath the softly falling snow. He felt lighter than he had in years, and Clara, standing in her doorway, watched him leave with a quiet smile, knowing that the unspoken truths between them were no longer barriers, but bridges leading toward a future that neither had dared to imagine until now. Sometimes, life offers these moments, small, unexpected yet profoundly transformative. And for Ethan and Clara, the turning point had arrived on a simple winter evening, through laughter, snow, and the courage to let their hearts speak. Even if only in whispers, the world outside was cold, but inside warmth had taken root. And that warmth, fragile and real, was enough to carry them forward together. Spring arrived quietly, softly replacing the frost with the gentle warmth of new blooms. Clara's garden, which had looked fragile and faded for so long, now burst with color. Tulips and daffodils reached toward the sun, and the roses, the ones David had planted years ago, bloomed more vibrantly than they had in a long time. Clara stood in the garden one morning, sunlight touching her hair, a gentle smile gracing her lips. She had become accustomed to seeing life in colors again rather than shades of gray. The last few months with Ethan had been slow, steady, and full of moments that reminded her it was possible to feel joy again without guilt. Ethan approached the gate, carrying a small potted plant. He grinned when he saw Clara, and she laughed softly. "You're early," she said, her voice warm with quiet amusement. "I couldn't wait," he replied, holding out the plant. "Thought this could join your growing garden?" Clara took it, her fingers brushing his for a fleeting moment. That touch no longer felt like a whisper of longing. It felt natural, comforting, and safe. They spent the morning tending the garden together. Ethan helped stake the tulips, while Clara gently pruned the roses. The easy rhythm between them, the laughter that came without effort, and the quiet glances filled the space between words with meaning. It wasn't dramatic. There were no grand declarations or sudden confessions. Instead, there was a steady, comforting truth. They belonged together in these ordinary, beautiful moments. After a while, they sat on the small garden bench, their hands brushing occasionally as they rested. Clara looked around, taking in the colors, the warmth, and the soft hum of life returning after a long winter. "I almost forgot what this feels like," she said softly. "To just be happy in the present." Ethan turned to her, his eyes reflecting the same tenderness she felt. "It's been a long journey," he said, "but maybe that's what makes it worth it. learning how to feel again. Slowly, carefully, without rushing. Clara nodded, thinking of all the unspoken words, all the moments of hesitation, all the fears that had kept her heart tucked away. And yet, here they were, two people who had discovered that the past didn't have to define the future. "I'm glad you stayed," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never planned to leave," he replied simply, and the sincerity in his tone made her smile even wider. They spent the afternoon in quiet companionship, sharing small stories, laughing at minor mishaps with the plants, and savoring the gentle rhythm of ordinary life. And in those moments, Clara realized that love didn't always announce itself with grand gestures or dramatic turns. Sometimes love simply arrived quietly, patiently, and persistently. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting a soft golden light across the garden, Clara and Ethan walked to the edge of the yard. The air carried the faint scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth. Clara paused, taking a deep breath, and felt a peaceful certainty settle in her chest. "I think," she said softly, "that life can surprise us when we least expect it. That even after loss we can find happiness again." Ethan looked at her, smiling. "And sometimes it comes when you're carrying groceries in the rain," he said, a hint of humor in his voice. Clara laughed, the sound bright and easy. "I suppose it does," she agreed. They stood side by side for a moment, letting the quiet of the evening settle around them. Neither spoke, yet neither needed to. The connection between them had been forged through shared moments, unspoken truths, gentle understanding, and the courage to feel again. Clara thought of David, the love she had lost, and smiled softly. Her heart carried the memories, the gratitude, and the lessons, but it was no longer weighed down by grief. She had room now for life, for joy, and for this unexpected chapter with Ethan. And Ethan, looking at her, realized that he had found something he hadn't known he was searching for: a quiet, enduring love built on patience, kindness, and the willingness to walk slowly alongside someone's heart. As the evening sky deepened into soft shades of twilight, Clara and Ethan walked back toward the house, the garden glowing in the last light of day. It wasn't a dramatic ending. It was something far more meaningful, a beginning that felt steady, real, and lasting. When they reached the porch, Clara turned to Ethan, her eyes full of warmth and promise. "Thank you," she said, "for helping me see that it's okay to hope again." Ethan smiled, his hand brushing hers lightly. "Thank you," he replied, "for letting